Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining this week's Customer Success Team's learning session. We have Ketsia Fa with us today, who is one of our technical experts, and he's going to be teaching us about exploring EMC ECS in On-Command Insight. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Ketsia.
All right, thanks, Joy. So for those of you who are not familiar with me, I'm one of the architects for OCI. I've been with the project for about 6 years now. Most of you who may have been around since then are probably familiar with the reports I built. As of 2 years ago, I've actually transitioned more into integration. So the conversations you probably heard around like ServiceNow integration and so forth are what we've been doing for the last 2 years. But again, for the session here, we're going to be talking about EMC ECS and how to actually find the data that you care about ECS inside OCI. So this is going to be a pretty quick agenda. Most of the data you're going to find is inside the data warehouse, but I'll just quickly talk about what EMC ECS is, how it's being presented inside OCI, and how that actually creates somewhat of a challenge based on what you may be familiar with or maybe what you're not familiar with, and then how to navigate through the different UIs, whether it's inside the web UI or the data warehouse. And again, most of the information will be inside the data warehouse. So I'll be talking about some of the data marks where you can actually find the data for ECS. So just to quickly kick it off, I am by no means an expert around ECS, but essentially it's software-defined storage, which means inside OCI, it doesn't fit the traditional storage model. So thinking about the storage pools, the volumes, and so forth, they're not going to actually be modeled in the same sense. So what they really care about is, because they're doing multi-tenancy, they typically look around the namespaces as well as, and it seems like somebody is unmuted here. Joy, can you mute that for me real quick?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out who it is here. I will take care of it.
All right, thank you. So what they care about is really the namespaces and the buckets. So looking at bucket utilization, so doing some sort of throwback or chargeback. This is an example of a report that's actually presented inside Viper SRM. So when a customer that has ECS wants to see that data inside OCI, they will typically want to try and model this. Seems like it's actually Karthik, Joy.
Yeah, I just muted all and it's not taking. I'm trying to do it individually as well. He signed on a couple times. I'm not sure if that's why. Anyway, if you could all put yourself on mute, I'm trying from this end.
Okay. So some example reports that you have inside Viper SRM is a summary capacity utilization, namespace chargeback, as well as bucket level showback. But when you look inside OCI, specifically the web UI, typically this is where, of course, you set up the data source for ECS. So naturally, your first reaction is, well, how does this look inside the web UI? And this is an example of what you would see. You would see just literally a box that says the summary, here's the model, here's the vendor, the family, and then the raw capacity. You'll also notice that because of the REST web UI, you'll see the microcode version is actually in here, and because it's null, it actually bumps the raw capacity up to that level. But what you care about, the namespaces and the buckets, do not show inside this model. This is because we actually model this under what we call the object storage model, which follows our cloud data model, which means everything inside ECS is actually found inside the data warehouse. How does that present a challenge for you? A lot of you may or may not be familiar with where the data is actually located inside the data warehouse. So we're going to be walking through a couple of examples of where you can actually find that data. So inside the data warehouse, you can find it under two different data marts. The information you just saw inside the web UI can be found inside the storage pool. But for the information that you care about, the one that you saw from Viper SRM is actually inside what we call the chargeback data mart. This is where we actually model the namespace and the bucket names under what we call the tenant and alignment business. So this is not something that you can actually configure inside OCI. Typically, when you are talking with us around chargeback and showback, you are setting up those business entities and associating with your physical servers or your VMs or your physical storage devices such as your LUNs or flex files. But in this case here with ECS, they're all pre-configured because they're essentially picking out the namespaces and the bucket names and populating into those fields automatically for you. One of the concerns that you may have then is how do I actually do chargeback, and that would include having to do tiers or annotations around tier costs or service level costs. Unfortunately, because this is going directly into the data routes, one of our only use cases that we decided to try and tackle first is around the showback side, which is presenting the bucket utilization here. So you can see what is being allocated and how much is actually being used by each bucket. What I'm going to do now is actually transition into the data warehouse. So just give me a moment here to actually move it over. And just to make sure, Joy, do you actually see my Cognos server here?
Yep, I can see everything.
Okay, perfect. So if you're not familiar with this, this is the Cognos 11. This is available in 7.3.3. So the UI may look a little different to you if you're not familiar with this. I'm just going to create a new report here. And first thing we're just going to do is go to the chargeback data mart. So I'm just going to create a blank page here. I'm going to select the chargeback data mart under the packages here. And let's just create a simple list here. So typically for most of the use cases when you're going to chargeback, I typically tell customers to ignore the simple data mart and just focus on the advanced data mart. The advanced data mart actually lets you do a little bit more flexibility around filtering. You actually get a chance to actually do trending if you wanted to as well. Simple data mart actually just addresses a very small niche use case, and as a result, you don't have any trending data. It's just point in time. But under business entity here, you can see the entire structure here, tenant, line of business, BU, and project. All I really care about is the tenant line of business here. And I'm just going to filter on a couple of these, which is this ECS side. So you can see here that this is the namespace, and then here's the bucket names. So from here, I'm just going to simply take in the provision capacity. And this is how much is being used by each bucket, essentially. Now, if I wanted to show you the tier, which I mentioned earlier, unfortunately, all you're going to see here for tier is going to be the object, or NA. So that is one of the caveats. You cannot put tier or tier costs associated with the bucket names here today. We know that this is something that we want to address in the future, but unfortunately, it's not available. Any questions around here? If you do want to put it in the chat, I can definitely address any of the questions. Or if you want to take yourself off mute, we can definitely talk about this as well. Feel free to interrupt me at any time.
Quick question around trending. Is that something that's available?
Sure. So unfortunately, this is a point-in-time recording of this ECS data source, but if I wanted to just showcase, if I actually had that available for trending here, let me just take out the filter. And let me just delete this provision capacity. What you want to be especially careful of when you're inside the chargeback data mart, you'll see that there's multiple ways to do the facts. So this is point in time, hence current. This is a weekly trend. This is a monthly trend. This is a quarterly trend. Even though this one says chargeback fact, it's actually a daily trend. So if I were to pull this data in, you can see a ridiculously high number because I haven't pulled the date in yet. If I do want to have that daily trend, I do want to pull in the full date here. This is where you can see that daily trend here. So you can see if I do a group by, you can see that we have data from 2013 of June. And it's just barely doing a daily trend of that. Okay.
And this is by bucket.
Yes, correct.
Oh, okay, that's great.
Yep.
Thank you.
So you can see here, unfortunately, I only have one data point for the buckets for this database. Because it's essentially just a recording of the customer's bucket. But if inside your environment, if you were to pull in the full date and you did a daily trend, you can definitely do a daily trend for each bucket. Does that answer your question?
Yep, it does. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. In the other data mart, the store and storage pool, essentially what you're seeing is inside this page here. And basically just turning out the raw capacity and the use. So I'm just going to show that real quick. So I'm just going to create a new report again. And this time I'm actually going to go into store and storage pool. So this is where you do your trending and forecasting for all your storage arrays. But what I'm going to do is just filter on that one particular ECS device. So again, I'm going to start with the list. And under all capacity, I'm just going to pull in storage. I'm going to filter on that storage device if I can find it. Here it is. And typically what you do is when you're looking at usable, you're looking at the capacity. But in this case here for ECS, you're actually looking at the raw and the used capacity here. So I'm just going to pull these data points in. So this is how much has been allocated, and this is how much has been actually consumed by the buckets. And if I just move over a little bit, you can actually see the column names. And of course, for this one here, you can do the exact same thing as you saw inside chargeback. If you wanted to trend it out, you can actually just go under date here and just pull that data point in. But unfortunately, again, I don't have any trending data for this particular device here. But if you want to see that for other devices, let me just take the filter out. You can see that we also have trending for other devices. So inside your environment, if you have ECS configured, you will see that daily trend. Any other questions? If not, that is pretty much it for ECS. It's a very short one. We just wanted to address where you can actually find that data point because there is some questions or concerns that inside a UI you're not seeing much naturally because you're only seeing the raw capacity because all the data points are actually inside the data warehouse. So if you don't have plan, this is going to be a gap for you because you actually do need plan in order to have both store and storage pool and chargeback inside your environment.
If you do have a question for Ketsia, you can take yourself off of mute and go ahead and ask it.
Okay, and just to finish it off here, I'm just going to go back to key takeaways here. So again, what we talked about is we just saw firsthand that ECS is not configured as expected as other traditional storage devices inside OCI. It's actually modeled a little differently because it follows a different structure. And as a result, all the data points that you need to do your showback and chargeback is actually found inside data warehouse, specifically around the chargeback data mart for the tenant, which is really the namespace for the ECS, and the line of business, which is the bucket names. So we're going to keep this on until the, I think it was at 3:30 Eastern, Joy, or was it 4? Yeah, so up until the top of the hour. So if you want to stick on and just ask any questions, feel free. If there's other things you want to talk about, you can also ask that as well. If there's other things you want to learn, just let us know in the email. Just send any feedback to Joy, and then she'll forward it up to the respective teams.
And thank you, everyone, for joining. I know it's a busy time of year for everyone. We really appreciate your time. And so if anything, we can give you a few minutes back today, or you're welcome to stay on and ask some questions of Ketsia. And I hope everyone has a happy holiday.
Thank you.
And thank you very much, Ketsia. You did a great job.
No worries, anytime.
And as Ketsia mentioned, we're always looking for topics. So if there's something that you have questions on that you'd like us to address, You can pop something in chat, send me an email, just, let us know, and I'll put it on our roadmap for you. Or if you have additional questions, feel free to ask, and we'll get back with you offline. I did record the session, so I will send it out in email after the session's over, probably not until tomorrow, and we'll go from there.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Could I had a quick question. I know.
Go ahead.
Yes, I know that NetApp at this point doesn't really record any of the backup information in terms of Veritas is concerned.
Mm-hmm.
I just probably had to ask this question to see if there's any suggestions that you could give. I'm trying to see if I can incorporate a feed into OCI from NetBackup because we already have client names, and we have a SAN environment, we have a NetApp environment. What I'm trying to do is see if I can give the client name and the backup data backed up to create kind of like a backup report because OCI already has a repository where it kind of has all the information that we need by service and by application, and the server groups as well. And if I am able to give this feed to OCI, it can produce the SAN reporting and backup reporting associated with the client. Any ideas how I can kind of set up that feed?
Is this more for almost like a showback kind of association report?
Yes. Yeah, precisely.
Sure.
Yeah.
So what we could either do is, if you can provide, like, let's say a CSV, we could do like in annotation import utility, map that to like the servers or VMs that are associated with the client. That could be one option. The other option is if there's other additional data points, we also have an open REST API. So you can take a look at that if you are interested to see what you can actually feed into OCI and potentially map that to what you may care about from a Veritas standpoint or from a NetBackup standpoint or and so forth.
Okay.
If you do want to take it offline, we can definitely get on the call to talk about more about what you want and then make a better suggestion based on how you want to present that data.
Okay. Yeah, that'd be great. I'll reach out to Joy to get your contact information.
Okay, perfect.
And then one other question I had was in terms of we have reporting today along the same lines. If I want to create a report that shows a client's SAN connectivity, NAS connectivity in terms of NFS usage. So let's say in the export file, I export the NAS file system, NFS file system to a bunch of clients. I would like to be able to create a showback report saying that this client has this much SAN usage, NAS usage, and then the question I had earlier was about backup. So kind of show those three tiers. Is it possible to extract that somehow from the controllers?
So what we can do is, from a capacity standpoint, you have three different levels for NetApp in terms of capacity utilization. You have the LUNs if you're doing block, but you also have the queue trees as well as the individual flex walls. So let's say if your share was like one-to-one with a flex wall, then you can use the flex wall capacity. But if it's one-to-one with like a queue tree, then you can use the queue tree's utilization based on quotas. So in that case, the queue trees would have to have quotas enabled for you actually have that utilization. And then from that, you can do your association similar to what we just talked about for the NetBackup in Veritas.
But would it recognize that it's an NFS mount to that client?
Yes, depending on how the exports are actually pulled into OCI, yes.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yep.
If you have, like, let's say a global export, for example, where every single host has access to that share, then unfortunately, no. It's going to basically just showcase that every single person has access to that share, if that makes sense.
Yep. Yep. Oh, yeah, we don't have the global. But,
okay, perfect.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, this is helpful. Thanks a lot, guys. Appreciate it.
Hello, Katya. I have a question about OCS.
Yeah, go ahead.
I did this chargeback report, and I compared the volumes to the volumes that I saw in ECS interface, and
Yep.
they're different. So there is a difference of maybe 10 or 15% raw space that is shown up in OCI, and with the numbers that I see in OCS, the same for the buckets. Bucket per bucket shows also different amount.
Is it per each bucket? So my question is more around, like, so for example, if you have like an ETL that runs once per day, we're only going to collect one data point for each day for each bucket. So if you have a very active client that's using the buckets.
No. At this stage, there were no data written to OCS, so it should be stable, and no process on the background of range recording.
Okay, if you can send me a screenshot just to show me a little better so I can give you a little more clarity, then that might be something that we want to probably take as a case by case, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I cannot send you at the moment. Can I get somewhere your email?
Sure, I'll just put it in chat here. 1 second.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, everyone, for the great questions. We've got a couple minutes left here if you have a last-minute one you want to get in there. Well, it doesn't look like we have any more questions, so I'm going to go ahead and close out the session. Katya, thank you again. As always, you did a wonderful job of explaining that, and to everyone else, Have a great rest of your day, and thank you for joining.